Many apologies for the delay in starting today. We've had just a couple of technical issues, starting with our streaming platform being down, but they came back to us. They fixed the problem, and we are a little bit delayed, but on. I'm here by myself today. I will soon be joined by Kyle Roof. And for the SEO Lounge, we're going to be going through SEO testing for fun and profit with Kyle Roof. So if you're in the audience, tell us where you are joining from and what you want to learn today. We're broadcasting the SEO Lounge on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and also the IMG website. So no matter where you are watching from today, you should have a chat or a comment box. So please just let us know you're out there and where you are joining us from. So in case this is your first time joining us, I'm Andrew Stephen. I am a co-founder at IMG Courses. And I'm also co-founder at Page Optimizer Pro and High Voltage SEO agency in Phoenix. Just before we get into the workshop today, a little bit of housekeeping. IMG Courses. So we're an online SEO school, and we offer the world's most comprehensive collection of SEO-related courses and training. We release new training from world-renowned SEO experts each and every month. Membership to IMG will set you back $97 a month, and that will get you access to over 45 up-to-date SEO courses, live mastermind calls, regular SEO events, and of course, our huge library of curated SEO tests, which we're going to be going more into detail on very shortly with Kyle. One of my favorite parts about IMG is that if you have any questions about the courses or the educational content or implementing tests that you've been studying or anything else that comes up, the community members are always up for answering any of your questions. They're super active and always helpful with the community and all the members. So if you're interested, that's internetmarketing.gold. I'll put here we go, that up on the screen. Struggling by myself today without the help of Lauren. So, as the case with all our guests in the SEO Lounge, in an attempt to serve the community, we host the SEO Lounge 12 times per year, completely free. It doesn't matter who you are and where you are in your SEO journey. It's our goal to connect you with the leading minds shaping our industry. So previously, guests on the show have been Viola Eva. She was teaching content marketing. We had Robbie Richards teaching quick traffic wins, Jason Barnard with brand SEO, Leo Solis on keyword research. And today, I'm very excited to introduce Kyle Roof again.
Hey.
Kyle, welcome to the SEO Lounge.
I'm happy to be here.
Kyle, as mentioned, is not only a guest on the show today, but he's also my business partner for the best part of 10 years. So it's always fun to do these live events together. Kyle has a pretty distinguished career in our field, actually starting off as a trial attorney, nothing at all to do with SEO, before getting into our industry. So I think what's kind of unique about Kyle is that you're pretty quick to set yourself apart from other SEOs through the testing, myths, theory, and chatter from other SEOs, and you're publishing those tests and sharing your findings when most other SEOs just weren't doing that at all. So Kyle, you made a lot of discoveries, such as Google's tolerance for duplicate content, the most important sections on a page to optimize. The big one that Google cannot actually read, which I think it's getting a little better at, but still truth. And you made these discoveries through a framework which you developed to isolate ranking factors within the Google algo, which you later had a patent on. So I've skipped over all of our fun adventures along the way, but a personal question. What is a memory from the last 10 years that sticks out from all the random places we've been and things we've done, Kyle?
Well, when you and I started working together, we actually went about a year and a half before we met each other. We were working together. We had started, for some unknown reason, we had started an agency together, and we had not met each other. And it was about a year and a half, and then we met in San Francisco. And I remember that we booked an Airbnb, and then we went out to dinner and some drinks, and I promptly lost the key to the Airbnb, but we didn't know that until we got back. One of my special skills in life is losing keys. I am wildly impressive at it. If you need keys lost, just give them to me. I will for you. And I lost our keys to the place, but it was kind of funny. Like I think the place itself had a keypad so we could get in, but the front area had a key. And my favorite memory is you going to the neighbor's house with this like guard dog and getting in and like kind of running through their yard and then hopping. Well, it was probably like an 8-foot fence to get over. At least, yeah, maybe more to get in. I was already looking at like other places to stay. I was already on my phone like, oh, we got to get another spot. But one of my favorite memories was basically watching you jump an 8-foot fence while being chased by a guard dog so we could get back into the Airbnb, only because I had lost the keys to the place.
Yeah, and I saved the day, if I remember correctly.
You really did. You made it. You made it.
And the hands of the guard dogs and possibly some maniac with a gun. It wasn't the best neighborhood. From memory.
There was an actual sign. It basically said, if you come here, you will get shot. Like it was like kind of like on the sign, and we're like, should we go?
Yeah. One other thing you left out of that story, conveniently, Kyle, is it was not us that booked the Airbnb. It was you that booked the Airbnb.
Oh, this was all my fault. 100%.
When we walked in the door, imagine a guy I've never met before. There is one nice looking double bed in the middle of a single room Airbnb apartment.
And the Airbnb was not accurate in its description. It was 2 rooms as it was described, but 2 rooms. What they meant was one bed and then like a chase lounge thing that pulled out into another bed.
Yeah. That was the beginning. So anyway, let's
you stuck on with me after all that. You made a horrible.
We would have thought we could recover from that. So anyway, I've got some other questions if you'd like to get to those. So from the more recent SEO test masterminds in IMG, could you take us through a couple of the more interesting discoveries that have been made inside of the platform with the SEO testers? Maybe even you could give us a quick look at some of those tests and show us like what's going on there.
Some of the thing that a lot of the stuff that's been happening recently is kind of with GTP3 and AI content. There's been a lot with that. I have done a bit with on the last testing series about Yep, the new search engine from Ahrefs. There's a lot going on there. Let me pull this up. The fun part about
one of the technical issues that we also had today getting live to was Kyle's internet outage. So he's in a phone box somewhere down in a corner.
So somebody completely aced a phone pole in my neighborhood, and it took out my internet about 4 hours ago. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yes. Just the plus button underneath the video. Or sorry, the arrow on the monitor, rather.
I'm very sorry. Share screen, I got it. So these are the tests within IMG, and so like from our last set, can Google detect AI generated from Article Forge? That's a big thing. So Article Forge is one of the larger tools that people are using to generate AI kind of content. Can Google detect that? Different research methods for finding easy to win keywords. So like just one of the users put together like, this is how you can find keywords that you can rank for quickly. Looking at, can you use QR codes for links or for ranking purposes? Can Google find disinformation? This was pretty interesting. The idea of like, if we post content that is wrong, does Google care about that? Is Google doing value judgments? Does that matter at all? As I mentioned, the one that I did on Yep, kind of a first look. What I was most concerned about with that is that are they using just their own metrics to rank content? And they aren't, because something they said is that once this goes completely live, you can actually make money off it as a content creator. So how can we get our content in and actually make a little bit of cash? Are they just using their own metrics? That kind of stuff. So we get into a lot within IMG, and it's really a lot of based off of like what people are doing themselves. Like the testers, what they're looking at, the SEO they're doing, where they're at is really where a lot of the content comes from, where these test ideas come from.
Right. Okay. And so, how is it working inside of IMG? You've got kind of like a group of core testers, and they're constantly submitting stuff. And what does that look like in terms of those being published and being reviewed and so forth?
Well, the thing is, anybody can join. Like, we're going to walk through today, like, kind of how to do some SEO tests and what some basic tests are and things that you can do. Like, not everybody is like a hardcore SEO. It's really what a lot of people are. They're just interested in learning about SEO, and they've observed some things, and that's kind of where we get to. Like, all right, so you're learning about this. What are you interested in, or what are you doing? And so, while there are people that are super high level, there are also people that are very, very new to SEO. But the idea is they have a passion to learn more about how this works. And so we get kind of people from all ranges and all backgrounds, and that's actually what is the best thing, is because people come from different backgrounds and different skill levels. They have different ideas. They see different things. And that allows us to get a really wide range of tests, kind of covering just different types of topics and different problems that come up in SEO that need a solution or need an answer. And that's what we go for.
Right. Okay. So, if you're interested in getting into SEO testing, or if you've been doing it already, but you're interested in becoming part of a bigger group that's doing it together, how do you go about that, Kyle?
It's really just contacting us. People can come in. Basically, if you give us one test within a quarter, that kind of gets you access to the testing group. And if you're basically producing 2 tests in a quarter, that gives you free membership to IMG. So you can reach out to support at internetmarketing.gold and say like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a tester. We can get you into the testing group so you can kind of learn about how tests are done. And then we can kind of guide you to how to do maybe your first test and walk you through what you need to do.
Oh, wow. Okay. It sounds pretty easy. You don't need to jump through a ring of fire or
Very few, very few hoops. The biggest thing is, the community only gets better when people are testing, right? So we want to make the barrier to entry as low as possible. If you have an idea on something you want to test, or you want to investigate something, or you want to be involved in this, we really want to have you. We want to see what you're thinking about and what you're doing, because I only see so much personally, and I only can test so much. I do about a test a month. That's about what my capacity is. And so I want to see what other people are thinking about, or what they see in SEO and what they're doing. And that's a big part of this whole thing. We want anybody from all walks of SEO, from all walks of digital marketing. We want to bring them in, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to get in and get involved in this.
Right. Yeah. So some of the tests are pretty basic, and then
Yeah.
some of them have been running for months and months and are very complex, right?
That's right. And
some of the
and
basic
we're gonna
ones
talk about,
are just as valuable as some of the more complex ones.
that's 100% right. We're going to talk about some things that you can actually do a test in about a day. Now, there are some tests that you could start right now after this and probably bang it out in a couple hours. And that's a very valid test and something that really benefits the community. It benefits you as you are working through that process, and then it'll also benefit the community when you share that. So we're really trying to make this as easy as possible for people to get in and get involved in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And the more people are running tests, then the more access of knowledge everybody in the group has.
Exactly right.
Obviously better for everyone.
Yeah.
Kyle, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about your courses. So you've got a couple of courses inside of IMG which are very popular. They've been the most popular courses consistently pretty much every month since we launched. That is On-Page SEO was the first one, and closely followed by White Hat SEO. What do you think it is about these two courses that has them consistently so popular amongst the community? And what do the courses cover, and who are they for?
I would guess the biggest reason is that this is how I do SEO. This is how we do SEO in the agency that you and I share. I don't hold anything back. There are no special secrets or anything beyond what's actually in it. Like this is how I think about SEO. This is how we have developed our products and our services that we have at the agency. And I think one of the biggest things is that they've been evergreen. I think I've gone through the crucible of people looking at it, critiquing it, going through it, and it turns out it works consistently. And that's the whole idea, right? That you can do something that will be evergreen, that gives you the best possibility for success. And I think that's the biggest thing those courses do. And they kind of, I think, span the range. If you are brand new to SEO, there's a lot that you can get in there and learn about. This is how SEO works. If you are super advanced, I'm confident there are things you haven't seen before that you can add to what you're doing. That's also something it's a good point, is it's compatible with anything that you like. If you have a framework right now, I think any of the concepts that I teach in these courses can be added to what you're doing. So there's no conflict. It's not like, oh, I now have to change everything I'm doing in SEO. I think you'll be able to find things that work for you within your framework, and you can plug them in and go. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, like if you ever played golf, it's not a new golf swing, right? Which is going to take you forever to learn all that. You can actually add this to your game. This is just maybe a better way of thinking about golf, or a slightly different way than like changing all of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of bolt on in a way. And I know, for an example, in our agency, like we don't have everything down either. And our team is inside of IMG, and we're also learning from the other courses and instructors inside of there. And one of the things which we kind of do is when there's a new course which we feel could add value to the services which we are offering in our agency, we have one of our team going through that course and extracting the steps and turning that into kind of a set of operating procedures, which we then turn into our own products. So that's also something that I imagine people can do with your two courses.
No, that's exactly right. You can take it and you can learn. You'll learn something for sure. And it doesn't matter kind of where you are with your SEO game and what you're doing. There's stuff that you can take in, add. You can create products out of and services out of for sure.
So I think we're coming around to the time when I'd like to start the workshop. What are you going to be covering today?
So we're going to talk about SEO testing. So kind of getting into the classic version of it, kind of what we're doing now, and then getting into some other testing methods. And we'll talk about a few tests along the way.
Terrific. Are you ready?
I am. I'm going to hit share and just let me know when you can see the screen and it doesn't look terrible.
Go for it.
Can you see all right?
Yeah, it's running.
Okay. SEO testing, it's us against them. And what I mean kind of by them is that you have some SEOs that say Google's too complex. You can't run tests on and by the way, Andy, feel free to jump in anytime if you have any questions, or if anybody pops any questions and they're good. Don't worry about interrupting me.
Sure, I'll be watching the chat too.
Some people say Google's too complex. The idea is that you can't run any tests because Google is so amazing and so large and so complex. Your tests are just completely invalid. At the same time, Google, whenever they do an update, have you seen recently, they say, there's nothing you can do, right? They say, we did this whole core update, or we did this whole thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. And basically what they're saying is it's also too complex. And what I think both of these arguments, and it's the same argument, by the way, but what they both miss is that we don't need to understand all of Google. I don't think there's anybody on the planet, including people that work at Google, that understand all of Google. All we need to do is pull back the curtain just a little bit. And if we can get a little bit of insight, then we can have knowledge that we can take advantage of and use. And that's because SEO is a game of probability. You will not be right every time. Even if you have something that this worked, it won't work every time. That's just kind of how the system is built. But good SEO is really just right 50% of the time. And that's a coin flip. What we're looking to do is get beyond that. If we can get to 70% right, now we can take advantage of things. Now we can do something that we know that if we consistently do it, it's going to bring ROI. And that's really where testing comes in. We're looking for things that give us an edge. Are they going to be right every time? No, because there are so many things going on. But can we get an edge on them? Absolutely. And that's kind of where this comes in. A big thing that testing also does is helps you cut through the noise. Once you start testing a lot, you can kind of realize if somebody tells you something or you hear something or something's going on, you can realize if it's BS or not. And that can save you a lot of time and a lot of money. And then I would also like to point out there are many types of tests. We're going to go through some today, but this is not an exhaustive list. I don't pretend to be the be all to end all of testing. I have not invented, all of the tests, and this isn't it. There's a lot of ways to do it. There are a lot of ways to go about it, but we're just going to talk about a few things. And if you have other methods or other things going on, I'm sure that you can do very well with those. What we're going to talk about are things you can kind of add probably to what you're probably doing.
Sounds great. Right.
So single variable testing. So this is the classic setup. If you're not familiar, a single variable test, the idea is that you want to get down to one thing. You want to test one thing within the algorithm. And so what that means is you want to limit as much as you can that's going on around that, just so you can get down to that one thing. It takes a lot of planning. Usually when people get into testing, or like their first thing is they saw something in Authority Hackers and they're crushing it, right? Those are great systems and they want to test this thing, but they're like 30 steps to it. That's probably not something to get into single variable testing, because it takes a little plan to get down to like maybe what that one thing or that. So like you have to really plan, what are we looking at? What are we doing? What are we trying to go after? And then another thing that's a big concept is do one, do to all. So if you have multiple control pages that are within this testing environment, if you do something to one, you must do them to all except for that one thing you're trying to test. And those are two big concepts you kind of have to overcome when you're first getting into what is SEO testing. Also, things need to be repeatable. If you can only do it one time, that's really not a single variable test, and that's not very useful. If you do it one time and you get a result, did you get anything out of it? Who knows? Probably not. These things need to be repeatable so that you can show them and other people can also do them themselves. And then there are some obvious issues. These things are best within on-page issues for sure, where we can see like, is this or is this not a ranking factor? It becomes a lot more tricky to do things within with backlinks, if you want that, or within multiple domains. That's also pretty tricky. Google also has their indexing issues within Google to begin with that affects these. So there are some issues there within single variable testing, and often those are some things you need to overcome. But overall, it's still a very viable method on how to figure out what's going on within Google.
So single variable tests, Kyle, do they have to be done in isolated test environments, or can they also be done within like field experiments as well?
You can do that. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit on some things you can do where you're in a situation where you really can't do a pure single variable. We're going to talk about some ways you can kind of get around that, or ways you can explore what's going on within Google for sure.
Okay.
Let's talk quickly about your test domain. So this is the domain that you want to do testing, where you're doing stuff and you're throwing this into the SERPs to see what happens. Think about it, if you test on it, it can burn, meaning Google can take it down. I quite famously lost about 20 test sites when I showed something in Google, and Google didn't like that very much. And they went out and they found 20 sites that I owned and they burned them down. So if you're running tests, make sure that you're running them on a site that you don't care about. Like, you could potentially use it. And that's a very important thing. If you have clients on the client side, don't run tests on your client site. That's a terrible idea. Run these on sites where you could actually lose it. You don't need fresh domains. If you've done a test on one domain, you can reuse that domain. That is no problem at all. One test is often one domain. That means as we try to restrict variables, you'll often create pages on the same domain. So that's okay. Like you're thinking like, oh, if I need 5 test pages or 10 test pages, do I need 5 domains or 10? No, probably not. Most tests we're talking about in this scenario, you can probably do on one domain. So you don't have to have a lot of domains in circulation to do these tests. I really like picking up auction domains instead of doing new domains. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to do like, kylestestdomain.com, I would much prefer to go find something that just expired or something that is on auction and get one of those, because Google's probably already trying to come back to that. You're going to get a little more traction. You can do a lot more with it quickly rather than a site that might be in a sandbox, if you will, if you like that concept. The Google might not have found yet. So Google has to kind of go through those things of finding it. If you can go to something that Google's already found, you could accelerate your testing.
Can I jump in with a quick question on just the basic setup of your test site? Like,
of course,
I think you're usually running WordPress sites. Like, what are your preferred kind of templates and setup for those?
Yeah, so WordPress is usually easiest just because that's an easy thing to do. You want to get as bare bones as you can. But it doesn't necessarily have to be WordPress. Really, I think the best test can be run on anything you can create quickly. Is kind of more the bigger thing, but you want to make it as bare bones as you can. It is kind of a good way to go about it, because you don't want anything that might be in a particular template or in a particular CMS that might be influencing the things that you're trying to test.
Okay. Omar had a good question just on the same topic as well. So do you use a VPN when you're setting up the test sites, and do you always have a new Gmail account with a new Google Search Console and analytics for each site?
So you can do that for sure. I found though, like we can run a lot within the same Gmail. If you're setting up Search Console, that doesn't seem to impact anything. And that just comes from my experience of doing this since forever ago, since about 2015, 2014. Having a Gmail or a Search Console does not seem to affect these types of sites. So you can probably put them all into one. I wouldn't worry about that too much.
That's a useful test in itself, actually, Kyle. Will save you
a VPN would be fine
if you being able to run your site. I said that's a useful test in itself, because it will save you a lot of hassle setting up a new account for each and every testing site.
For sure. Yeah, I don't think that's any problem. And then I would just use a VPN for checking if you're checking your results manually, and if you want to check in a particular Google, you want, let's say US, or you want UK or something like that, I would use a VPN in that situation, but otherwise you're fine. So classically, the classic test keyword is a keyword that produces no results in Google. So this is something that I saw back in like 2014, 2015. I realized that there was a place where the sidewalk ends. You can put in a keyword and you can find no results. And then what occurred to me is like, well, if there's no results, that means I can manipulate that. I can put pages into that, and then I'm the only one that has it. So a big thing is looking for keywords that have no results in this classic sense. And I initially used Soy Bomb, and you can probably still use it now. But the idea is that it created words that don't exist. And so they're words, just kind of random letters put together. They kind of look like words, but they aren't actually words. And so, Andy, this is a blast from the past. This is from my first talk in 2015 when I talked about how to set up SEO tests. This was the first example that I gave. And so it was this particular fake keyword. And the idea is this is what you see.
Kyle, just a sec. I'm getting a message in the chat that we can't actually see the slides. Just going to ask if you could unshare your screen and then reshare it again.
I shall try again. Maybe if somebody else can say too, if they're having the same issue, just to make sure it's not one issue.
Yep, it's fixed.
Okay. So this was the original slide that I shared in the first time I ever spoke about testing in 2015. And this was the idea of finding a keyword and then you don't have any results. And then what occurred to me was that, okay, I can manipulate this then. If I create keywords for this particular term, that means I control the entire SERPs. I don't have to worry about anything going on. It was the basic idea. And then I kind of got into doing lorem ipsum. And the reason I got into that is because I was trying to, again, eliminate as many variables as I could. And we realized that lorem ipsum would index. And so this was the original, the generator, the lorem ipsum generator I was using, generator.lorem-ipsum.info. It has options for paragraph or word count. A lot of lorem ipsum actually starts with the same phrase, and you can actually not do that. And then using plain text, so the idea of like making sure you weren't getting code into your thing. But this was also then the second screen share that I shared in, or shot that I shared in 2015. I'm confident that most of those advertisers are not still in business, would be my guess. But then the idea was we can get lorem ipsum here, and then we can put our random keyword into it, is the idea. And then we can then start to create SERPs that we completely control with while minimizing variables. And then here's the very basic setup. So in a very basic setup, you want to create 5 identical pages. So we're going to create 5 pages, and we're going to use the same lorem ipsum. So the lorem ipsum we created from the generator, we're going to put those on 5 different pages. We're going to take that fake keyword that we found that doesn't have any results, and we're going to put in the body. And a lot of people like the idea of around 2%, which is a pretty normal-ish amount for a target keyword. You probably want it in your H1 and title tag, because those are the 2 most important places to put a keyword, and that's going to help you index. And then you want the fake keyword in the URL next to the .com. And the idea is, again, we're trying to, to eliminate variables. So when you need a unique URL, because you can't just have 5 pages with the same URL. So how do you go about that while creating something that is still unique? And the idea is that, let's say we've got examplesite.com, that's our test site. You can put the fake keyword there and then a random set of letters behind it. And then you can do it again, put the fake keyword closest to the .com and then a different random set of letters. That provides unique URLs. So you can your 5 identical pages, while they still have pretty much the identical lorem ipsum, they have unique URLs. So you've got 5 unique pages in this scenario. This is what it looked like in the old school WordPress. And again, I was happy to find these screenshots, because again, this is what I shared in 2015. But the idea is, so you got the fake keyword in the URL, you've got it in the title, you got it in that H1, you've got it in the body as well. And that's kind of how you can basically set it up.
Do you remember what that test was for, Kyle?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember what that specific test was for?
I honestly have no idea. I just remember that I had those screenshots from the talk.
Okay.
Honestly, actually, it probably was nothing. It was probably just example purposes. But from there, then it's the idea of like kind of waiting to index. And back in the day, you could here in Search Console just like request indexing, and Google would probably crawl it and index. But as you probably know, not just testing, but the world has had indexing issues for the last 2-3 years. But something that's been really fun kind of within the testing world is that because we had issues indexing our test pages, it allowed us to test a lot of things just to figure out indexing. And that instantly translates to what you can do in the real world. So something you can do, you can submit to Search Console, but you can also submit to like the mobile friendly checker or anything else in Google. That often encourages Google to come to your pages. That's something we figured out because, our test pages aren't indexing. Let's try this. You can do sitemap. So obviously there's the XML sitemap that you can submit to Search Console, but we found an HTML sitemap is very valuable. That's a sitemap that lives on your site that has links to internal pages. Google prefers finding internal pages or finding pages on your site by a link. That link can be on your site. And we learned that through these indexing issues. You can use indexers such as Omega. These are all hit or miss, or like speedlinks.net. These are hit or miss, but those things can be valid. They can be used. You can buy cheap links. We found you can buy cheap links and use them for indexing purposes. You can reuse pages that have traffic already. Again, like that's a page on your site, maybe wasn't doing anything, but it has a little bit of traffic. You can reuse that. And then internal links. We found internal links are very valuable in terms of indexing. But all of these things were done to figure out how to index test pages. And then a lot of them became techniques that we now use on real sites. Things like when you're having trouble indexing pages on sites that you really care about, a lot of these we can use. And these things came about just because we were having trouble with testing or getting those pages. And that's one of the things that, so even though none of these were really a direct test by and large, they were the result of, because this is what we're doing, we're trying to figure out Google, we can then also figure out these things that are kind of almost ancillary or just kind of adjacent to the whole concept, but still learn very, very valuable information.
Although there was a number of tests over the past 6 or 8 month period that were exploring indexation
For sure.
techniques as well, right?
Oh, for sure. Like let's try some specific thing. But a lot of it, the initial genesis of this was like, let's just can we just figure this one out? Can we figure out what can work for testing purposes? And then the thing about when you do this type of work, and when you're in it, you learn so much more about the algorithm, and even though that necessarily wasn't what you were shooting for specifically, it's kind of the idea.
True.
So in the classic sense, you want to confirm that you're indexed, and this is what they kind of look like initially. So there's you get a little duplicate content, but you click the repeat, 5 show up, and then you change one thing on one page. You change, so you've got identical pages, and then you change one thing on one page, and then you see the result. And so the idea would be it look like this. The top one, it was number 3. We changed one thing on it, and then it moved up. And that was a very encouraging sign. The idea was that then you might have found a positive ranking factor. And that's the very essence of testing. So we've got these 5 pages. They're all identical. We change one thing on, say, the one that was in the middle area for indexing. It pops number 1. Now we're thinking we might have found a factor. But you can't really stop there, because you must repeat these tests. A very important point is they are very, very repeatable. You really need at least 3 successful tests. 5 is a better number. Once you get to 5, you're at about 96%, which is just shy of statistical significance for scientific purposes. But a way to shortcut that is to test in the inverse. So the idea is here, like all those test pages were similar, and we added one thing to one, and then it shot up to number 1. You can test in the inverse. You can have 5 pages that all have one thing, and then remove that one thing, and it should then drop. And if it drops and you've tested in the inverse, I think you can really fast forward your knowledge in terms of what you found. So if you add it to a page where no other pages have it and it goes up, positive, and then all the pages have it and you remove it and it drops, negative, you probably found something that is a factor within Google. And you can probably fast forward the idea of running the test all those multiple times. You also want people to review it that you trust. And this is an important thing. I miss things all the time. People miss things, even if you've done this a lot. It's really good to have people review what you are doing, because you might miss very important points where you think you found something and you actually end up testing something different. And again, it's important to understand that the whole point of all of this is to increase your probability for success. The more times you repeat, the more times you have it reviewed, the more times you try it in different modes, the more confident you can have that you found something, and that also then increases your probability for success when you take it from the testing area and put it into the real environment, where you're really trying to then go after specific terms or influence ranking.
Kyle, do any examples come to mind of tests that you've run that have then developed further into practical applications in the agency or in the software that you can think of?
Oh, for sure. So the first thing is the Google Can't Read series. So a lot of the first tests that I ran was really kind of getting to the idea that Google isn't reading like a human is reading. Google is powerful. Google is amazing. Google, unreal. But Google is not human. Google is trying to emulate a human, but Google really isn't. And so the idea is like, grammar isn't an issue. Spelling isn't an issue. Reading level isn't an issue. Those are all things that kind of go into like the good content mode, but they aren't actual ranking factors. Obviously, you need to write good content because you need people to come to your site. You need them to convert when they get there. But when it comes to ranking, that's not what it comes to. It's not just that don't write good content. And so this is from 2019. It's one of the rhinoplasty examples. This is a site that is completely written in lorem ipsum, and it's been up since 2019 and is still ranking number 1 and number 2. And I got this screenshot today. I got the screenshot about 6 hours ago. And so this site is still ranking with using lorem ipsum and simply placing the target keyword in specific places on the site, because it's not, Google isn't reading, Google is looking at areas on the site and looking to then find the terms that are in those areas. And so this is ranking number 1 and number 2 for a fairly competitive term, and it's been ranking since 2019.
Unbelievable.
Like this, completely flies in the face of everything you might hear about SEO. This is the actual example of you've been lied to the entire time, and continue to be. people always say, like, when I do these types of things, like, oh, you got lucky. Well, I've been getting lucky for like 8 years. Something tells me I'm not getting lucky anymore. But, you can do what you want to do. It's kind of what it comes down to. Like, you don't have to listen to what I say at all. And that's actually what I encourage. You don't have to listen to what I say. You can test this on your own. You don't have to believe this. You can actually go and do it yourself. And that's the point of these tests being repeatable, and you can jump in and actually be involved in this and do it. But times change. So in addition to indexing issues, what we found in the last year or so is that lorem ipsum pages don't rank as consistently as they used to. And fake keywords don't index as consistently as they used to. And we think Google's going after spam. I think it's a bit disingenuous, though, because if I have a keyword that nobody else is ranking for, that's not really spam. I'm not taking up any space from anybody else. But obviously, Google wants to go after this because they have conceded this is an actual way that you can learn about the algorithm. You can learn about Google by doing this, and they don't want you to do that because ultimately they would prefer that you just buy ads from them. So they don't really want you to learn about how the algorithm works because it's not in their best interest. So while they say they're going after quote unquote spam, what they're really doing is they want to make sure you're not learning. That's what they would prefer. So I can see them going after maybe sites that are lorem ipsum. So what we started thinking about was, what about English ipsum? So this is English words that are put together, and it looks like English, but it is not. It is just random words that are put together. But then more importantly, we thought about random or unusual English words that are put together in a combination. So you get an unusual phrase. And can we basically set up the same types of test environments that we were doing with the lorem ipsum and the fake keywords and basically do this, and it will be as effective, or at least pretty close. So this is an example of this site that I found that will put random words together that are unusual. So like disquieting, disrepute as just a random example. So I took a phrase that I got from them, and then there's only one result. So that is great. So, and that's doing it, the search in quotes, meaning that are people doing on-page optimization for this particular term? We find that really only one site comes up. So it's not the perfect no results, but there's only one. Then we can grab English ipsum from here and put in our target term in there. And in one day, we were able to get a page to index for that random phrase using English ipsum. And that's a huge discovery, because before we were really having a lot of trouble with these test pages indexing using lorem ipsum and the fake keyword. But now we know we can use English ipsum with random words put together. And basically, it's not as pure as it was with no results, but we can get very few results, and we can then still get after SERPs that we completely control and run tests within a single variable environment.
So do you think that the algorithm finds it very difficult to decipher the English ipsum from regular English phrases and paragraphs that actually make sense?
100%. This goes back to Google cannot read. Google isn't reading as a human would. A human would look at it and be like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But Google cannot do that. And Google has not been able to do that. And it will be a long time probably before they can. And
Gianna
in that interim,
wants to know, what about Chulu ipsum? It seems to be a joke. I don't get it, but maybe you do.
I don't know.
Okay, moving on.
All right. So the big point is here, get creative and get going. So a big thing that holds most people back in SEO is that they have all these ideas. They've got great ideas. They've heard great things, but they don't actually do anything. And what I want to encourage people is, within this testing environment, just up and go. Just do it. All right. This isn't the only method for single variable testing. So if you've seen something else, don't let this hold you back. Just do something. Get involved. Get going. There's also huge value in failure. Just because your test doesn't work doesn't mean you didn't learn anything. And usually the tests that fail teach a lot more. So don't be embarrassed, like, I don't think this worked, or I made mistakes, or I was doing that. You will learn so much in that process. So make sure just to go and do it. I would start with something easy if you can. Start with like test H2s or H1s or something very straightforward, just so you can get the idea of like building these pages, what's involved, what do results look like, that kind of thing, before you get into something really heavy. I would start with something easy. And we're going to get into this now, Andy, a couple other things. There are two other options for tests. You don't have to do single variable testing to learn stuff about Google's algorithm. You can get into field observations, you can get into case studies. And often, if you're just new to testing, both of those are a really good way to get into this whole thing.
Yeah, just also to build that confidence to show results based on really simple experiments that agree with your hypothesis will help build a lot of confidence and just confirm that there are things in the algorithm that you can prove and understand that you can also repeat and get the same results. Like I know
Exactly right.
there are some of the original experiments that you're running years back, and this is really fundamental stuff, but like the weighting of different elements on a page in the algorithm. So what sections on a page are the most important to the least important, and where that had a practical application was eventually in the output reports in Page Optimizer Pro, where you can show an unlimited amount of information, and a lot of tools do, but how much of that information is relevant and what order should that information be recommended to the users in order to make the most important changes that are going to have the most like drastic and positive effects on their sites, right?
That's exactly right. Like, where should we spend our time and money is a big part of all of this testing. What's going to give the most impact for the least amount, and finding the spots on a web page that give you the most bang for your buck is huge. Where should we be spending our time? Where should we be focusing on? If we need to do something just quick and dirty right now, what should we do? And these types of tests allow you to figure those things out. All right, next. So field observations. If you see something, say something. It is kind of the idea. Like this is if you're doing SEO and you're observing things, let's get those observations going. So most tests that become single variable tests start here. Like, you saw something going on, and then now is the idea to test it. So often field observations are a great way to intro your way into a single variable test, because you can then look at what's going on within that observation, what you saw, and then kind of figure out maybe what's happening. So this can come from your own site. This can come from Search Console, maybe a tracking tool that you're using. This can come from a competitor's site. This can come from the SERPs. One quick note, it always impresses me how many people don't look at their competitors or don't look at the SERPs for the keywords they want. They just look at tools. They just look at, say, some reporting tool. You will learn so much more by looking at your competitors, and you'll learn so much more by looking at the SERPs than you will from any tool. I mean, obviously the tools break down a lot of the data in terms of like the math that you can't do just by eyeballing it, but you really want to look at what's going on in the places that you are trying to rank in. You can get field observations from a Google announcement. Google said we're doing this now. You can get it from a publication, Search Engine Land or Search Engine Journal said, somebody from Google said something, or they report on something else. You can get observations from that. You get it perhaps in a tool, like why a particular tool is doing a particular thing. But once you've identified something like, hey, what is that? Then you can go and gather data. You can go and look through sites to see if multiple sites are doing this, or if it's only an isolated incident. How does this thing particularly work? Like, you can look at like how sites might be doing something, or how a certain SERP responds when you do certain things. Now, I think it's important to understand you need to look for good examples. Every once in a while, somebody finds something random on some crappy little site, and that one little site is doing something. That's really probably not a solid observation, especially if you can't find it on other sites. So you really want to look for like a strong authority site that might be doing something once you identify a thing, or multiple sites that are doing it. So you can't just like kind of find it in isolation and then try to extrapolate data out of it. You want to categorize these things across probably multiple sites, especially maybe one strong authority site. And I would also point out, a lot of people see these observations and they don't really write them down. You want to write it down and make it clear what you were seeing, because you will get lost in your own data. You'll get lost in your own observations. You'll get lost in your own research. Make sure you're writing these things down. Create a spreadsheet, and you can kind of keep things together. And even if you're not planning on submitting this to anybody else, so you're not looking to give it to IMG, you're just doing it for yourself, so you can do that. I really highly recommend being as systematic as possible, be as detailed as possible. Write all these things down so that you can then track what you're actually doing.
And what do you use for tracking here, Kyle? What's your own method for being
More often than
detailed
not,
in
it's
your?
just a simple spreadsheet. Just put
Okay.
it down in a very simple spreadsheet. Be very clear. Put annotations. You don't need anything fancy to do any of these things. Just keep it in a way that you do it. I've seen people draw things. Maybe they hate spreadsheets, but they can actually just draw on a little piece of paper what they're doing. That's completely valid, and that's totally a great way to do it. But any which way which works for you. So here's an example. So we're comparing Google Search Console with Lighthouse and Webpage tests. So this was a few months back. This was actually beginning of this year. We're seeing all these warnings in Search Console. When you click on Core Web Vitals, which is a super hot thing, you see these warnings within Search Console. You can see here there are 51 affected URLs, and we get this warning. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? So the idea was like, let's look at Lighthouse, which is a tool that Google gives you to kind of scores your site in terms of page experience. It's like, oh man, that's not a good score at all. It's a 68. What does that mean? But then let's say Webpage Test, and Webpage Test is one of the old school tools that's really looking at how your site is performing, and boom, we're crushing it. Like our time to first byte is great, our cache is great, we're compressing our images, everything is really good. And then we took it one step farther on this, and like this particular page we're looking at was ranking number 1 or number 2 for its term. So there was no impact on ranking. And basically going through multiple sites and multiple pages that were within our Search Console where we could do this comparison, we realized that warnings in Search Console for Core Vitals meant absolutely nothing. And what was awesome is that Google removed warnings last month. Google completely took those away, but we got this information in January. So when you're thinking about, you only have a finite amount of money and a finite amount of resources to do your SEO, where should you be spending your money? What we figured out in January was it's not on the warnings. You're not going to get any extra value or benefit from fixing anything that's a warning in Google. It's not going to affect your rank, and it's not really affecting anything else that might matter. And then what Google ended up doing is, because I think people were getting upset and wasting money and all that, was Google actually removed warnings from Search Console, but we got that data about 8 months in advance before Google ended up doing anything with it.
So just to unpack that a little bit, Kyle, does this come back to comparing what's in the SERPs, who you're competing against, and not really paying attention to the warnings inside of Search Console, but comparing, for instance, your site speed scores against the sites that are beating you?
No, this is just looking at your own stuff. You don't even have to worry about what your competitors are doing. This is just looking at your own sites and your own pages, how Google scored them. So within Search Console, which is a Google thing, within Lighthouse, which is a Google thing, and then within a third-party tool, which was scoring things quite well, and then comparing that to the rankings that you currently have. And what we found is that the Google tools, while they gave them negative scores, clearly didn't matter at all. Whereas the third-party tools said, hey, we're doing pretty good, and then our ranking was great. And we can do this across our own pages. So you don't have to even dive into competitor things, but we can see oh man, Google's kicking this warning out. Is this important? Should we do something else? Should we spend our budget fixing this thing that Google says is a problem? And in this case situation, the answer is absolutely not. And then several months later, Google actually took that away, saying yeah, don't even worry about those. They weren't that big a deal. I mean, it's almost like Google saying, I don't even know why we're reporting that, because it was a complete waste of time.
So testing discovered that Core Web Vitals is not actually a thing. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, Core Web Vitals, I wouldn't worry about too much just to begin with. And there's been a lot of testing we've been doing in IMG, and so far it's been a giant nothing burger for sure. But in this particular case, should we worry about these things? Should we worry about the warnings that Google's kicking out? And the answer in this case was absolutely not. You don't have to worry about it at all. All right. So again, as I mentioned, gathering examples is huge, and you don't have to go far and wide for these things. They can just be your own examples and then compare against the different things that you're seeing. And as I mentioned, we had this information in January, which gave us a huge edge. Basically, wow. What you kind of hope is that your competitors just listen to what Google is saying or what some guru is saying, and they just follow that, and they waste all their money doing those things that aren't going to help them rank. And you can spend your time and money doing things that will actually help you rank and get an edge. All right, so the last one we'll talk about here is case studies. And this is really just doing SEO. And ultimately, this seems hard because I know people have seen case studies that are in publications, and then this is like an eight month case study, and that's not really what we're talking about here. I mean, you can do that if you want, but that's not really the thing. Really, it's just doing something and then showing what happened. That's really what a case study is. We did this thing and this was the result. So think about like one technique that you heard about. So this was in a course that you saw or in a YouTube show. You can do that one technique and then show the results. That's kind of what we're talking about. And there is huge value to that. That's to yourself to try it out before you put it on a client site or your own site that you care about. But then also that's something you can share within a community that you're involved in testing, and like showing that one thing and showing how it actually works, and then what the results were. It could be a particular service that you saw, like we're trying out this service from this particular provider. This is what we had to do. This is what we got, and these were the results. It could also be like a tool walkthrough. This brand new tool showed up, or this tool has a new feature. So this is how we did the feature and all that. And these are things that are wildly valuable to a community that you're in, or they're extremely valuable to anything you want to do in SEO. Like, hey, you want to try these things out in a safer environment before you put it on any site that you care about, or if you're doing agency work, before you do it on any client site. And that's where case studies can be huge. So this is one example. So there was a thing that we saw where you could use a link shortener, and you can do a bunch of 301s through it, and you're going to get it was the be all end all. You're going to get amazing results. So we started with capsule link, which is here. And then the idea is that you can put in a particular link, and you can then get a link shortener, and you're basically kind of 301ing one link to basically the other link through this link shortener. And we did a whole bunch of 301 type things. In this particular case, we shot about 20 to a test site. The end results were, you can see the low result and we got the high result, so pretty decent. And then it tapered off for about 3 months. So our 20 links that we redirected to a particular site, we got about 3 months worth of results from, and that's not bad. So was that the be all to end all that it claimed to be? No. Was it nothing? Also no. But now that gives you kind of an expectation. If we spend our time and money doing a particular thing, what can we get out of that? And then we could actually then feel good about if that's a good idea for us or not, or making a recommendation or not. So some takeaways just real quick. Don't do this on your site. I'm not advocating this is something you should just, Kyle says run out and do it because I'm going to get 3 months worth of value. That's not the point of what I was just showing. The idea is that you can take something that somebody has done and you can test it out. I would also advocate having a real test site. And by real, what I mean is do like a blog for cat shoes. That's not anything that anybody's going after, but you could actually create a site that is somewhat real so that you can do these types of things. When you hear about a shiny new object or a new service or a new technique, you can actually do it to this site. And if your cat shoes site goes down, you're not going to be crushed, but you can actually see how it might perform in a realer environment than you get in a traditional testing site. And then you don't have to listen to anyone.
Who knows? It might become a good side hustle.
I'm sorry?
Take off.
Yeah, maybe that's actually.
Who knows? It might become a good side hustle.
Maybe I should have looked at the search volume before I recommended that. But you don't have to listen to anyone is the point. If you have a site where you can do these types of things, you don't have to just take anybody's word before you do something on a site that you care about. You can kind of put it on these sites and actually see the results and then measure, is that worth your time? Is it something you should do? Not having to listen to people is massive. Not being beholden to what they think or what they're doing and just have to blindly trust them is massive. And if you have these things set up where you can do that, you really are in control of your own SEO, and you can really, again, increase your probability of success. So Andy, we kind of mentioned earlier with IMG Internet Marketing Gold, if people submit a test, that gets them into the testers group. 2 tests gives them 3 free months of membership, and they're full members. They get access to all the courses. We also give, just to offset some costs, we give people $50 for every test they submit to us, just to kind of offset some costs. And then quarterly, we do some nice results or nice prizes, $1,500 for kind of the best test, $750, and then $500. So people can kind of get in if they want to do some prizes, and they don't have to be it's not always the craziest test that wins or kind of gets into the money. It's often oh, that was actually pretty innovative, even though it didn't work. And so that's kind of what we get into with an IMG to kind of incentivize people hey, if you want to be involved, this is a lot of fun. You want to share these things. We want to reward you and offer prizes for what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
But,
and if you're doing it anyway, then Why
Yeah,
not?
exactly. If you're doing it anyway, this is another opportunity.
Do you remember the test that won last quarter, Kyle? What was that?
Oh, I wish I could. I can't off the
That's
top of my
okay.
head.
We got another one coming up. I think the next SEO
It's this week.
Testers Mastermind.
It's this week.
What, next week?
It's this week actually. But if people want to get involved, they can totally get involved now. And even if they don't make it for this particular test, we have Q4. So like they can start working on tests now, and there's plenty of time to get them done to get them in for the next quarter.
Terrific. Thanks, Kyle.
And
We
then,
got a bunch of questions lined up here. Did you want to
right.
skip across to some Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll just stop sharing and then we'll bounce into that.
All right.
All right.
So, Amit, what do you think about the AI content update? I think it's interesting that he called it the AI content update. Can Google really figure out if content is generated from AI tools or not?
So right now there are free tools you can use that find GTP2 with a lot of accuracy, and they're free. So that tells me like the best tools are using GTP3. My guess is the Google probably has that already, and they go after the sites that I've seen hit by the helpful content update are pure AI sites. Sites that use AI to start their content and then their editing, I haven't seen any issues with that. But the sites that just decided to do 30,000 pages of complete AI, those are the ones that I've seen hit by that update.
Terrific. Brian, I may have missed this, but what do you think works better, English Ipsum or random alpha?
I do English Ipsum is what I would do now. And that's coming from the last couple of weeks worth of testing.
There you go. And
can you read that one?
Tool that you're using to generate that? Follow up. Do you want to share that?
Where do you generate English Ipsum? It's a dummytextgenerator.com, I think is what it is. But to be perfectly honest, it doesn't matter what you use. Any of them that generate something is completely fine. But I think it's dummytextgenerator.com. That's just off the top of my head.
I'll put that up there. I'm not sure if that URL is 100% correct, but
something around there.
Okay. Just sorting out the questions from the comments. Omar, besides DA not being a ranking factor and duplicate content 51%, what is the most shocking test you've done?
I get asked that a lot. Like, what's my most shocking thing? And I don't really know. All of them, I mean, they all provide insight is kind of the thing. There was one way back in the day, like the home-to-home link. So putting a link on your homepage to your own homepage, and that actually produced a result, and that was pretty shocking because that's like an old school spam. So we do from time to time find things that are old school spam, like from like 2005, and it works, and that's always kind of fun. But like I struggle thinking of like what was like most shocking or all that, just because they all provide value. And once you get a result too, and you feel good about it, it feels like Christmas. Like you got a present from Google, and now you've got something. So they're all kind of fun and interesting once you get an actual result.
Yeah, that's right. And while a lot of people are focused on what's happening on the cutting edge side of the algorithm, you also got to remember that there is a lot of legacy stuff still in there, which you can test and find that people think probably has no impact anymore, but it may.
That's right.
Do we need to do SEO testing on our site based on the client's target audience? I think I know what he's getting at. Testing is not really niche based. I think, am I right with the way that you're doing it, Kyle?
Most of it is not, but I mean, you could run a parallel site that's in the niche, and if you wanted to, you could probably get some data based on that. So you could run something that's similar kind of in parallel too, and run it, and you might get slightly better information than just running it kind of niche free. But that's up to you. If you have the time and budget and inclination to do that, then you could definitely go for it. I'm not sure if you're going to get any specific info, unless like you want to like really run something like, okay, we're going to run it for this particular niche, but I'm not sure how much there is there to actually do.
Another one from Omar. I'm gonna leave you to unpack this a little bit. Are you seeing anything different in the core bell curve tests, e.g. H1 meta title paragraph URL, after the helpful content update where it says to avoid search engine first approach, right?
Yeah, no, like the top places are still the top places. I think really what that was going after with the helpful content is going after just purely AI content that was meant to rank for keywords with really not doing any editing or thinking about your audience at all.
Yeah. And a good reminder that Google has been saying not to write content for search engines since basically it began. So it's nothing new either. Someone wanted to know about the difference between Webpage Test and Lighthouse, and this was actually already answered by Neil, who actually has his own course on Core Vitals and Lighthouse inside of IMG. So Lighthouse is using your connection, and computer web pages uses one in the cloud, so it's more stable. To answer that one, I believe pretty much up to date. James, are there any public tools available in bulk create HTML test pages?
No, I don't think there are any public tools. Not that I've seen like that anybody can access, but not 1,000% positive, but not anything that I've seen.
Yeah. But they're not that difficult unless you're trying to create. You can probably create one yourself without too much effort. I wasn't Jasper AI. I wasn't impressed. Do you feel that the amount of editing one would have to do would be roughly the same amount of time spent to write content the way you teach in your
I think it
course?
does fast forward things. Like it helps you kind of get that initial content creation going. So I think it's there for that, but you do have to edit after, and there's a lot of editing. But it's probably good for that first initial push to get something going. But after that, there's a lot of work you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had another similar question from CF Base. I hope Kyle answered that with the last one. Brian again, how are you finding the keyword density with related keywords playing out? I'm finding it to be similar to the old days, just tighter on the topical level.
I would agree. Brian's is a very sharp SEO, by the way, but I agree totally.
And CF again. So you use the AI tool first and then use POP to optimize it, or do you just do it all by hand?
If it's a page that I really care about, that I want to, what I would consider like a target page, to show up in the SERPs, I probably would not use AI for that. I would do through a content writer. If you're looking for like supporting content or things you might put on other sites that kind of would then help your target pages, I think that's where AI would be better used to kind of get that initial push for that first chunk of content.
Saeed, looking for tips on what you're doing right now to get indexed fast on a new site.
New sites are hard because you need Google to come get to them. So links do that, like Google getting to your site. But if it's a brand new site, you're kind of, I wouldn't do a lot. I would kind of just do the basic things you do to start a site, and I would not try to push it too hard on a brand new site.
There's a lot of chatter still going on. I'm not sure what's going to make the best questions. Craig has a question on how Pop compares with Surfer or Neuron Writer. I'm pretty sure that you don't really want to comment on that. Maybe you should just try out both and see which one you like. Or is there a little pitch that you want to throw in there as well, Kyle?
No, it's all right. I've not heard of Neuron Writer. I'll go check it out.
Okay.
But there's no reason to throw elbows in a.
Anders Jensen wants to know where to sign up to start testing. I think we gave out an email address before. I'll just add that in here again.
Yeah. Yeah, just hit support for IMG if you want to get him.
And that is the email address to use, support@internetmarketing.gold, and someone in support will help you out with that. Neil wants to know if there's been many tests in the library on schema.
I don't know in our current library if we have a lot, to be honest. The stuff that I've seen from back in the days on like maybe product schema, because you can like, will this help maybe a particular product, and that seems to do pretty well. But I'm not sure if anybody's kind of narrowed down, at least in a single variable testing situation, about like getting into schema.
James also had a question similar, how you might go about doing a single variable test on entities. You might have to.
I don't know. It kind of depends on what you're looking at. There are ways to go about it, but just like entities in general is kind of a broad thing. They kind of like, what are you looking to do? And we could talk about outside of this how to set up those types of tests.
I am not a cat. Doesn't need cat shoes then. Can you use Medium, Blogspot, etc., or websites to run test pages on? That's a good question. What does it need to be?
You can. Yeah, I've seen them done for sure, but I would try not to for those types of things. I would because they have their own authority. They have other things going on, because when you end up like with those subdomains, it's kind of like a quasi its own site, so it's kind of part of it, but then kind of on its own. So I would set up domains as a first choice.
See if there's anything else coming through. Some general advice questions, which are kind of not super relevant to testing, which I might just leave out for the time being because we're running way over time. But thank you everyone for contributing, for coming along, for all of the very intelligent questions. And thank you, Kyle, for the presentation. I personally got a lot out of it. I'm sure SEO testing is going to be in more abundance following this presentation from you.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope we can also generate more interest in the IMG SEO testing group. We have the SEO Testers Mastermind coming up later in the week. For anyone who is a member, you can go into the IMG Vault and you can get a link to when there's going to be 2 of those happening, depending on which time zone you are in. You can go to either one which suits you. There's going to be some great prizes up for grabs as well. So thank you very much, Kyle, and everyone who attended today. Also, a reminder that if you missed some of the recording and you want to watch a replay, we'll be sending out that in an email tomorrow, I believe. And I think if you're interested in signing up to become a member, there may also be a special coupon code in that email for you as well. Also, we'll be doing this event in another 4 weeks with another mystery guest who we have not actually decided on yet. So stay tuned for that. We'll be letting you all know if you have registered for this event, when the next event will be, and what we'll be teaching in that event. So that's it for IMG this month. Thank you, SEO Lounge, and thanks very much for coming along. Sorry we're a little bit delayed again, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Take care.